Hey everybody, and welcome to ESHQ's Good Game, Well Played. I'm Greenhavak, your host, and I am joined on the desk, if you will, by one of our analysts, Cynize. So we are approaching the end of Season 9. Well, Season 9 is over by the time you're watching this video. We're approaching the beginning of Season 10. So I gotta ask, how'd the season treat you?
You know, it wasn't that crazy for me. I was on and off. I created a new account to train for, for my main account. So this is what you suggested to me, where I practice in competitive with another account and use my main account for when I'm warmed up, which is a great idea. And I've spent most of the season getting it to level 25, trying to practice my aim hero and all of that stuff. And really, I'm kind of more or less prepping for Season 10.
Okay,
That's right.
For me, I hit a new career high this season, so I'm very happy with that, and I am excited and a little nervous for the upcoming season. We've got so many changes coming in, especially if any of these PTR changes go live. We've got Brigitte coming in. Just so many things are up in the air.
Yeah, that's right. You got the May changes, you got the Reaper changes. You have just so many tweaks. Hanzo might be joining us eventually. So what do you recommend? If I love the current meta, what do you recommend? When are these changes going to be put into this new season?
Well, the nice thing is the season starts before Tuesday, so before a potential patch day. I personally am going to be doing all of my placements before any of the PTR changes hit, because there's a tendency for when those kind of changes happen that players want to jump on and they want to only play those heroes because they want to reorient to the way that those characters play. And it's so, for me, for a consistency, I would suggest going ahead and getting your placements out of the way sooner than later, or waiting.
Interesting.
So those would be my two things, because the last thing you want to do is put yourself in an easy tilt scenario where someone who isn't used to the new pulse bomb, or isn't used to the new Genji deflect, or is trying out the new Hanzo. On top of that, Brigitte is going to be joining the fray. So it's like there's a lot of variables, a lot of changes. So you either want to wait for the meta to kind of simmer down a little bit,
solidify,
exactly, or jump in before any of the PTR changes go into effect.
That makes sense. In the beginning of each season, it's usually chaotic. In the beginning, everyone's trying to get back to where they were, make sure they're placed where they want to be, and that's going to be added upon with these changes. And it's going to be kind of fun to play on my second account with these new changes coming in, because it's just going to be chaos, and that's what I'm really looking forward to. Not on my main account, trust me. My main account is going to be placed, done before all these changes hits, and maybe hopefully rising through the ranks a little bit. But once those changes hit, man, my other account's going to have so much fun.
Yeah, and that's the other reason why I personally, and it's almost a shame actually that Overwatch in a way forces this to be a thing, but it is something I highly recommend to people. Is make sure you have two accounts. You should have two accounts, because that lets you have an account that you're a little more whimsical on. And I don't mean not trying. I mean you're playing heroes that maybe aren't in your primary rotation. This account, your ult account's typically going to be a lower ranked account, not because you're throwing on purpose, because I don't condone any form of play like that, because I think it's only detrimental to our own community. However, having an account that you warm up on, play alternate heroes on, learn the meta on, it's your practice account, and you're still trying, but you're learning on it.
It's your competitive PTR account, if you will. Yeah, not bad. I like it.
I like that actually a lot. And and that lets you, take what you, if you're like, oh, you know what, I really do enjoy playing Tracer. I've been playing it a lot on my alt accounts, and I'm really getting work done. Now you can bring that over to your main account and see if you can play at the rank that is your highest ranked account.
Yeah.
And it's little things like that help your own sanity a little bit, because for me, like when I was climbing this past season, knowing that if I'm really in the mood to play Overwatch, but I feel myself tilting, I can take a little bit of a break, because for me, I don't like the arcade. I despise quick play. And when I want to play Overwatch, but I feel myself tilting or I'm getting too frustrated with going up and then going down, it's nice to be able to have a way that I can continue playing ranked without worrying about, okay, am I going to be 200 SR down, log on tomorrow and be annoyed at myself? So for me, having these alternate accounts to manage your own stress, to manage your own ability to learn and grow as a player, it's a big one. So I'm happy to hear that you're enjoying it.
I have. I mean, it was a very good tip. And if any of you have any tips or tricks for the beginning of the season, or maybe even at the end of the season, let us know. That's kind of cool information that we would like to provide for our viewers, and what we would actually personally like to know as well. We're always trying to improve our game. So if you have any recommendations, let us know.
And on top of that, we just enjoy the conversation, all the pros and the cons and the different perspectives from different players, because after all, we are all one big community. So as we reach the end of the Overwatch season, we are reaching the end of the Overwatch League Stage 3.
Yes.
And this is turning out to be the closest, most intense playoff race so far.
That's right. This week really set up a huge pool of people that could possibly take those second and third spots. We have Boston Uprising, who's just top of the pack. They have the possibility of going a completely perfect stage, which is insane to me.
Exactly.
Insane. And then everyone else is like up one or tied with their wins on their games. And it's really going to come down to how many maps they have won.
So currently our playoff picture looks like this. Boston Uprising have clinched. They cannot lose their spot in the playoffs. Where they finish in the playoffs is still up in the air. So right now they're in first, followed by the New York Excelsior at 7-1. Boston is at 8-0. New York Excelsior at 7-1, which means that they have also clinched the playoffs. They will be in the playoffs, but their positioning in that clinched spot is not solidified yet. Following up, we have the Los Angeles Valiant at 6-2, followed by the Los Angeles Gladiators at 5-3. In the hunt, this is where it gets the most interesting. In the hunt, we have the Houston Outlaws at 4-4, the Seoul Dynasty at 4-4, the San Francisco Shock at 4-4, and on top of that, we have the Philadelphia Fusion at 4-4. So this is a very exciting situation, and on top of that, technically, the London Spitfire still have a shot into the playoffs. They have to go perfect, and a bunch of other teams have to lose, but they are still in the race, and I love the fact that we have this many teams battling it out and trying to get these spots, because it just makes this entire race that much more delicious.
That's right. And really, they are even working harder than any of the first two stages, because they're starting to see the finish line. We have 4 stages, and then we have the finals. I mean, that is what they're all looking towards. They're starting to see the horizon, the ending point, and they are just kicking butt, taking names, and working their pants off. That's for sure.
And it's because, and again, it's these teams, like you just said, they're starting to really see it. They're really starting to realize kind of the mortality of this season. That they're starting to really lament these games where they should have got the 4-0, but they took it a little easy on the last map and they dropped one. And then the big thing for me, when you look at the overall the league, and we're going to hop back to the stage in a second, the London Spitfire have slipped down all the way to third, and with teams right on their heels. The big thing that keeps them in a strong spot going into the final stage is that their map differential is plus 34, which 35, which is the highest in the Overwatch League, except for the New York Excelsior, who are sitting at a pretty 62.
It's insane. Just absolutely insane. And really, the Boston Uprising, I feel like they were one of the teams that really figured it out earlier than the others, where these maps matter. And they really hunkered down to start training and practicing more. And they were a good team to start with. But I really feel like they realized how close they were to the end. And it really shows in the stage. The first two stages, they're on and off. Near the end of the stage, they're mostly on. Beginning, they were, they were just starting to warm up.
They definitely struggled understanding and fully comprehending the metas.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, and at the end of stage 2, it clicked. And stage 3, they just rode that wave. And these games haven't been easy for them either. They're versing a bunch of people, and the last week that the Boston Uprising is going to be one of the toughest. They're going against, I believe, Valiant and the Gladiators, going against the LA area.
You can't say it better than that. The Boston Uprising are on the verge. They have 2 games left in the stage. They are on the verge of having the first undefeated stage in the Overwatch League. New York Excelsior has almost done it twice, but they have dropped a single game now in all 3 stages. Boston has not yet. They are 8-0. Only LA stands in their way. That is if that's not a storyline to get excited about, especially because both LA teams need. Valiant is sitting at 6-2. They could afford 1 loss as long as they pick up their other game. That would clinch for them. However, the Gladiators, a loss could remove them from the playoff race, or at the very least put them into the playoff hunt.
Right, that's right.
And that would be a huge setback.
They're going up against the Mayhem, which clearly it's going to be a tough match, but one that they can usually win. I'd say they have a 90% chance of winning against the Mayhem.
Well, see, you know what? I would say that in most weeks.
Sure, yeah.
I would say in most weeks they have a 90% chance. I would slip that down to a 75% chance for this week.
That's understandable.
Because they know they need to prep for Boston.
That's fair. That's fair.
Because they know they're going to need to analyze that footage, really pay attention, and dig down to make sure that they don't drop. Because the other thing is, even just dropping maps can hurt them.
Sure.
Now, getting the win almost select. If they win out, they are in. They win both their games, they are into the playoffs. But those maps really could hurt them as far as the season goes, because they are sitting kind of middle of the pack. Their win to loss rate, their map loss ratio isn't the greatest. So I could see them over committing a little bit and leaving that little window.
That's understandable, and that makes sense. Mayhem, they're starting to really try to take a little bit more maps than what the teams actually want to give them, which is 0, but still. But yeah, no, they definitely have, I feel like, an easier week than the Valiant.
Yes.
So that will be in their favor, but still, they are depending on Valiant losing that one, Gladiators winning both of their games. And that's going to be interesting to see if they do. And Boston, they really need to step up against Valiant, and then, just like relax a little bit against the Gladiators. That's all they need to do.
Well, that's the other question, though, is now for Boston, do they play as hard as they can and try to get the perfect stage? Now, obviously, that's good for the season.
Sure.
It would help them a lot in the season to do that. But where are their priorities? Do they want the stage? Are they going to show all their tricks and their gimmicks and their ability? Because they're going to play these games and then have to turn around and play the top 4 teams.
Sure, yeah.
The one and you got to imagine if they go all out to try to win these games versus the Gladiators and the Valiant, and the Gladiators and the Valiant are the teams that make it into the playoffs. These games are fresh in the mind. Sure, you know. And if they have to play their A game to do so, so where's the strategy? You know
I say take no chances and you just go all out. The more you play at the highest peak that you possibly can, the more you'll improve. That's how you push your limits. And that's what Boston, I think, understands. And that's what Boston has been doing these past 8 games for stage 3.
The other thing to note is that the Excelsior play against the Dragons and the Fuel this week.
Okay, so 2 wins right there. I'm sorry.
If Boston drops one of their games, the New York Excelsior have a very real shot at taking the number 1 seed from them.
Interesting.
And which would kind of take the wind out of Boston's sails a little bit, to be this strong the entire stage, trip at the finish line, get put into second, and on top of that, that means instead of playing one of the teams that's in the hunt or the Gladiators who are barely holding on, Boston would go up against whoever really starts to dominate, which means that team is on the hot, has the hot hand.
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like it puts them in a little bit of an off position, especially going up against two top teams. The Excelsior going up against two mid-tier teams. It's a lot to ask of a team.
Sure, definitely.
So,
and I mean, if Boston does take it, if they do get the perfect season, that means they are in the first seed. That means they're in the finals. New York Excelsior, they're going to take their two games.
Yes.
No, that you can't argue with that. They're going to take that. So that's going to be, and this is all if Uprising can take both games. And so what does that mean? It means that Valiant has basically taken that third place in a sense if they can take their game against Philly. And that's going to be a tough game.
Exactly. It's going to be another really big game. Philly has looked a little up and down this stage.
Yeah.
But it got kind of in all stages. Stage 2, they looked a little more consistent, but they still looked, up and down, a little hot, a little cold.
Sure.
So that's gonna be real interesting as far as that goes. The other outliers. So we have Spitfire going up against the Dynasty and the Dragons. So realistically, they're probably going to beat the Dragons. The Dragons are improving, but I don't think they're to that level yet. The Dynasty needs both wins to stay in the race. Valiant needs, or not Valiant, I'm sorry. Fusion, Outlaws need both wins to stay in the race. Outlaws and Seoul go up against each other. So Seoul has two huge games. Houston plays the Shock, who are in the playoff race.
Yeah.
And then they play Seoul. So literally this entire week is nothing but playoff race teams clashing with playoff race teams.
That's right. And there's money for grabs. So these teams are going to go after it.
Exactly. So you gotta wonder how the strategies are going to unfold, how teams are going to handle the pressure. Are we seeing new lineups? Are we seeing new tricks? We saw a Tactorb this week. What are we seeing for these teams to try to claw their way into the Stage 3 finals? And here's, in one sense of the word, our opinions on who's going to take it, because we are now into the power rankings.
Yes.
Of week 4. So for me, power rankings of week 4. It's been an interesting week.
Yeah, sure.
We've had a lot happen.
Yeah.
We've seen, like I said, the Attack Torb. And they didn't win the map with it, but I mean, you know what? I will always appreciate some ingenuity.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
For me, all in all, when it comes to this week, I gotta go Excelsior taking the number 1. They looked slightly shaky versus the Shock, but the Shock play a style that has been working really well against the Excelsior, and they adapted to it.
Okay.
And so for me, the Excelsior coming up big with that, and then dismantling the Seoul Dynasty.
Yeah.
To me, right there, that shows me that they're going, no. We are still the best team.
Yeah.
There's some questions about maybe this stage, but when you talk about the season, you remember our name. Coming up in the number 2 spot for me is the Los Angeles Gladiators.
Thank you.
Now,
yes,
I think the Gladiators still have a few things I want them to clean up.
Of course.
But if Fissure plays the way he can, Surefour plays the way he can, and Asher is at least somewhat on, because he's a little off and on, they are one of the best teams in the Overwatch League.
Right.
The problem is they have a tendency to, Fissure has a great game and Surefour sleeps a little bit.
Sure.
Fissure and Surefour, do great, but Asher totally loses the Tracer battle. So I feel like they need to clean that up a little bit, but I feel like they are absolutely nearing the top echelon of play.
I completely agree with those first 2 picks. Absolutely perfectly said. Yes.
Coming up in the number 3 for me. Now, this one might be a little surprising to people. I'm going Houston Outlaws.
Really?
I'm going Houston Outlaws because...
Tactorb, that's why.
Well, the Tactorb helps, but for me, it's, they get punched in the mouth by the Gladiators.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, what do we do? They rally. They take this game to overtime when they really didn't have a huge... They should not have been able to take that game to overtime.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
But they fought through. They adapted, they switched their gameplay up, they changed their roster a little bit, and the Gladiators were taken. I mean, they were taken from dominant play and handily winning to, wait, hold on, we're being taken overtime?
Yeah.
So for me, that and the fact that they realistically dismantled the LA Valiant, to me, they are a team that still needs to get all their cards in their hand and play them at the same time, but they are a team that looks strong and definitely has the potential to make a playoff push. Coming up in fourth, and I know they lost their one of their games this week.
Yeah.
Also to the aforementioned LA Gladiators. But for me, I am putting the Spitfire, despite their shaky stage, back into this lineup. And it's because they, without a true answer to Surefour, who, when he's on, is one of the best Widows in the league.
Yeah.
They took Gladiators, again, to overtime when Gladiators had no business being taken to overtime. And then
could be that third map, or that fourth map. I don't know. We might be a little bit shaky, but you know what? That overtime map, we're getting better at. Apparently, we're getting more practice on it.
And then for me, the fact that now the Shock are a team. They beat the Gladiators.
Yeah.
They made Excelsior struggle a little bit. They have been in people's faces getting wins that people didn't expect. They beat the Fusion, and I mean, the London Spitfire came up and said, "Hey, kid, sit down."
Yeah.
And that kind of win, especially when the stage has been so shaky for them, was a big one. So for me, I'm going with them for that spot. And my final spot,
that's a tough one.
It really is a tough one.
The
for this
first
week.
three teams that you mentioned had difficult weeks. Really. So the difficult weeks really add to the points in which you're giving them when they do win. The remaining teams are barely winning the games that they should be winning and losing against the games where they should be overcoming. So really this one to me is up in the air.
And for me with this final spot, and it's going to sound a little weird.
Sure.
I'm going with the San Francisco Shock.
Even though they lost both of their games.
Their games, because they really, really, really made the New York Excelsior struggle. And Excelsior did what you expect your top team to do. They rallied, and they overcame.
Sure.
The Spitfire are one of the most gifted rosters in the Overwatch League. They're struggling, but they're a team where you expect big plays, big wins out of them. You can never count them out.
Right.
The Shock made both of them change the way they play, force players to make hero plays. And so for me, the fact that the Shock is forcing the top-tier teams to play like top-tier teams is a huge shout-out. Now, I know you might be thinking, well, I mean, Boston won both their games. For me, Boston struggled versus the Dragons. They didn't look convincing, and they dropped a map to the Dragons. And versus a Dallas Fuel that was missing one of the only star players that they have,
right?
To not convincingly beat the Dallas Fuel. Now, they beat them 4-0, but I'm talking map to map.
We're looking at 99-99, like super close points, like 2-3, 3-4, and all that stuff.
Whereas where you could think on each map, I don't know, can Dallas take this?
Right.
You know, is this going to be a 3-1? Or could they maybe get this to overtime?
Right.
And that to me, they're down one of their star players. They have been shaky this entire stage. You're trying to be the top team, and you don't look great versus them. And then on top of that, you struggled hard versus the Dragons, which again they are improving. They're getting better. But for me, it was a shaky week for Boston, so not quite in the top 5 for me.
That's understandable. I'm gonna take yours. I want to change the Shock because I feel like the Shock losing both. And yes, they kind of look good, but I feel like Sinatra wasn't playing absolutely to his best.
That's fair.
So I'm going to go ahead and replace them with the Philadelphia Fusion. I feel like the Philadelphia Fusion gave Seoul Dynasty a run for their money, bringing them into overtime. And I feel like they are getting back on track. This week wasn't up for them. I personally feel like. So, I mean, it's the game against Seoul Dynasty wasn't great, but I feel like it was just a weird day for both teams. I'm going to give it to them. I'm going to give that last position to the Philadelphia Fusion.
And See, for me, and I think this is just where we differ here,
Yeah,
because so for me, I'm saying Shock as a team looked great this week. For if I'm understanding you correctly, the Fusion had individual a lot of hero plays.
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
it's oh, we're gonna lose this map. Oh wait, never mind. Carpe clutched it.
You're right.
Oh, we're not gonna be able to get to the point. How did Fraggy do that?
That's right. Like,
And
I mean, they had individual heroes pop up and be like, "Don't worry, guys, I got this." That's what I kind of like. I enjoy watching.
And I get that, because on top of that, it's basically, when you see that from your team, you know that you just need to tweak back to week 3, get that coordination firing again. You have that coordination, and if you know you can make those hero plays, yikes. So, and I also feel like the Fusion had a little bit of an upset. That I feel like they really wanted that win versus Excelsior.
Sure.
And then falling short and then losing to the Shock kind of hurt them a little bit. Their team morale looked a little off. So the fact that they're still able to make hero plays is definitely notable. So I think that's fair to put them in the top 5. But as far as week 4 of the Overwatch League, that's the GG, and keep it well played.